Have you ever met someone with a certain kind of je ne sais quoi? Being in their presence, well, it's utterly spellbinding. Their magnetism, unparalleled. Once upon a time in the literary community, there was a powerful witch, much like this. And she seemed to know all the tricks of the trade. She talked the talk, using all the right publishing lingo. And she walked the walk, rubbing shoulders with award-winning authors who commanded the writing community's trust and respect. But was she a good witch or a bad witch?
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
Or is it more complicated than that? Truth be told, I've been nervous about sharing this particular story. Why? Because this one hits close to home for me. But sometimes you've got to get a little personal. I'm going to introduce you to a former friend and collaborator of mine. The charming, the bewitching, the bewildering, the mysterious Anna March. Don't recognize the name? That's okay. It's not her real name anyways. False alias or not, that didn't stop me and many of my friends and colleagues from falling under her spell. Welcome back to Missing Pages. This is the podcast where we revisit some of the strangest, most bizarre things to happen in the literary world and try to make sense of them. We do the research and dig into the cultural context using the benefit of hindsight to figure out whether the media coverage got the story right the first time around. I'm your host, Beth Ann Patrick, literary critic, writer, and publishing insider. After the break, I'm opening up about my experience being deceived. When we come back, Inventing Anna, the Anna March story. Welcome back to this episode of Missing Pages, Inventing Anna, the Anna March story. Where shall we begin? Chapter 1. Let the good times roll. Laissez les bon temps rouler. Picture it. You're in downtown LA. It's a crisp Thursday night in early February. You've been waiting in line for an hour, and finally, it's your turn to catch the next elevator up to a rooftop party. The event is at one of the hippest hotel bars in town. Everyone who's anyone is there. And the host? She's mysterious. A recent transplant from the East Coast. She's middle-aged with eye-catching pink hair. She whisks around the mezzanine bar in a fabulous polka dot dress. Who was this woman?
I do remember being at that party in LA, which was at the Ace Hotel, and, all of literary LA was there.
That's Melissa Chadbourne. Or should I say, the almost Dr. Melissa Chadbourne. She's an author, journalist, activist, and PhD candidate at USC's creative writing program.
And we were just like, what is this party? Like, hello, LA? So, she moved here and she's throwing a party in an open bar? And we were like, whatever, free drinks.
A native Angelino, Melissa joined me from her home in Los Angeles to recount this swinging party and her other experiences with the woman she knew as Anna March.
There was a line out the door, and she went up to people at various times throughout the night, people of influence. She would say, oh God, there's a line out the door. I should just go down there and give them $20, And so she did, which was such a weird thing. So I think she thought that if she threw money at this thing, then perhaps it would make her more legitimate author or something.
A post from 2015, cheekily titled, "Party Like the Literary Industry Isn't Collapsing In on Itself," from the online magazine The Rumpus, name-checks Melissa along with other reputable writers, announcing the event. Looking back, many of the writers mentioned were recognizable names, synonymous with feminism, activism, and the majority hailing from historically marginalized backgrounds. Anna appeared legitimate by association, and in the book world, it's pretty much about who you know.
I left that party still, just baffled by who this person was. And But again, it was free drinks, and it was a night that I can hang out with other people that I knew and liked.
When there's an open bar, writers drop their guards.
Right. So at that party, we did all think that it was weird. I will say, like, we were all looking at each other like, what are we doing here? Whatever, free bar. And I think a big part of that party, too, was that she was at the time telling everyone that Dan Smetanka at Counterpoint was courting her. And so to see him at a party that she was hosting was also sort of solidifying this thing.
Melissa is talking about Counterpoint Press here, a well-regarded publishing house based out of California. And the him she's referring to is an editor from Counterpoint who was also at this lavish party at the Ace, which seemed to validate a story that Anna had been telling. Full disclosure, Counterpoint is actually the publisher of my forthcoming memoir. But at that time, back around 2015, both Melissa and I remember Anna saying that Counterpoint wanted to publish her work. The body of work in question, The Diary of Suzanne Frank. A novel, it promised to be an unabashedly sexual take on the justly famed Anne Frank's adolescent diaries, written while Anne and her family were in hiding from the Nazis. I'll add here, to further paint the picture of this person, Anna March had Anne Frank's Shoah number tattooed on her forearm. Many in writing circles, from what I remember seeing and hearing, expressed distaste for this tattoo. But to Anna, it seemed to represent her devotion to the murdered Jewish teenager and to other femmes who had been silenced throughout history. All right, where were we? So this 2015 Hello LA event, which marked Anna March's launch into the LA literary scene, exuded credibility vis-a-vis its affiliation to this community of notable authors and editors alike. But who was bankrolling this whole soiree? Holding an event at a rooftop in downtown LA with an open bar? Well, that's not free.
My wife, who dropped me off at the party, saw Adam.
Adam is Adam Pisakowicz. This was Anna March's fiancé at the time. The two had recently moved from Rehoboth Beach to the West Coast together for what appeared to be Anna's entry into literary LA.
This was a party that was mostly on the rooftop or, the top floor of the Ace Hotel. And Adam's in a wheelchair. So he's like in the foyer in a wheelchair and paying for the whole damn thing.
Along with being published in Salon.com and The Rumpus, the year before this event, in 2014, Anna had gained notoriety for writing about their relationship in a piece for the New York Times' celebrated Modern Love column.
When Anna March started dating her boyfriend Adam, people made a lot of assumptions about their relationship because Adam is paraplegic. Her essay is read by Mandy Moore, who stars in NBC's This Is Us.
And yes, in the podcast episode about the article, that Mandy Moore, from such classic films as Saved and A Walk to Remember, gives a heartfelt read of Anna's article. How about a little snippet?
Here's the thing about Adam and me. Despite all appearances with him being disabled, I actually consider myself to be the less able person in the relationship.
Anna actually appeared in a follow-up interview on the Modern Love podcast in June 2018 to reflect on the relationship.
It's not about the walking. Adam and I always used to say it's not about the walking. When they say something like someone who's able-bodied is somehow doing something noble by dating someone with a disability, we're all doing something noble when we openly and honestly try to love someone else.
From an outsider looking in, Anna seemed fiercely compassionate and maybe like a woman with her heart in the right place. In this follow-up interview, she also talks about the couple's subsequent breakup.
About a year after my piece appeared in Modern Love, Adam and I split up. If that's what was best for both of us, although I certainly didn't think that at the time. I think that I didn't love Adam as generously and openly as I could have.
And here, it does kind of sound like Anna takes responsibility for her missteps in the relationship. But as Melissa uncovered in an investigative article she co-wrote and reported on for the Los Angeles Times, published in July 2018, only a month after this interview came out, there was more to the story. Here, Melissa recalls finding out about Anna's breakup shortly after that glamorous Hello LA party when the two met up to discuss future events of its kind.
We met one day at Stories in Echo Park in Los Angeles to talk about it. She had just moved to LA. She wanted to sort of plant her seed here. She really wanted to get roots here. I was meeting her for this thing I didn't know about, which was like a common experience when working with her. It's just like she has this idea. She wants to start a nonprofit. She wants to upend the patriarchy, and we're going to meet for coffee. And you're like, what? Okay. So I went there and she showed up, 30 minutes late, totally disheveled, a wreck, crying. Her and Adam had broken up, and, she didn't know what to do. And she walked out and left.
It's so interesting because, of course, that's exactly how she approached me and got me involved, was through, I want to start Lit Folks DC. It sounds like alarm bells went off for you pretty early, but people still treated her like a legitimate professional acquaintance.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that the alarm bells go off and then I'm like, oh, but, she's working with a huge person when it comes to publicity.
As Melissa and I traded war stories about our experience with the charming and mercurial Anna March, I began having flashbacks to our first chance encounter. When we come back from the break, how I got involved and then, thankfully, uninvolved with Anna. Chapter 2. After the party ends. Après la soirée. To recap, Anna is an emerging writer with bylines in reputable publications and a Rolodex of important literary connections. She loves to wine and dine writers and appears to have the budget to host fabulous parties. And Anna is mission-driven, starting nonprofits and aligning herself with causes that empower underrepresented voices and progressive feminist writers like herself. I probably met Anna March a few weeks after this party at the Ace Hotel that Melissa attended. The timelines are a bit messy. This is partially because the world in the months surrounding the 2016 election was a bit messy, and partially because everything involving Anna was always a swirl of confusion. Here's how I remember our first meeting. I'm sitting at a table in the leafy garden of DC's Tavern Inn. Its very name is a literary homage to the inn where Chaucer's pilgrims told their tales. It seemed like the perfect place to meet up with a new writer friend for lunch. In she sweeps, all striped stockings and pink hair, Anna March. She's asked me here to talk about her ideas for a group. She plans to call it Lit Folks DC, building on the success of her new West Coast community, Lit Folks LA. I already know of Anna through a friend with whom she's launched the Lulu Awards, which are intended to honor femmes whose writing is sex positive and from diverse perspectives. As you'll hear, there's always someone credible you know who seems to endorse Anna, so she gets the benefit of the doubt. While much of the lunch remains a blur in my memory, at one point I do remember when Anna asked about my own work. I said, I'm still emerging, but I think I'm a good writer, at least. Then, dramatically, she took my hand, leaned toward me, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, I think you're a great writer, Beth Ann. A great writer. And at that precise moment, she reminded me that she was treating me to lunch, so I'd better order dessert. Somehow, I can't think about Anna without thinking about food and drink. And I don't think this has anything to do with her own consumption or with her plus-size physique or mine. Nearly everyone I talked to fondly remembered that Anna never skimped on a party. It has to do with the aura of abundance and excess Anna cultivated everywhere she went. If you were having breakfast with her at a conference, bring on the tall stack of pancakes and extra bacon. For a writer's retreat lunch, there were multiple casseroles of gooey mac and cheese, enormous green salads, and multiple baguettes. People who visited her at her Rehoboth Beach home were encouraged to have picnics and large frozen cocktails seaside. At another conference, she took a few dozen writers out to the Palm for a feast, plying them with martinis and appetizers and steak. Anna March fed people well in order to cultivate a different kind of hunger, a hunger for connection that is both obvious but also seen as shameful in creative types. She fed people exactly what they needed to hear at precisely the right moment. My friend Luis Urrea, an award-winning author, joined me to reflect on his experience with Anna March's charm and tact.
Anna March, what's up with that?
What do you remember about Anna?
She wrote to me. She was amazing. Hit it off right away. You know me, besties with women. I was like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. We would just got off and running. And she was coming to Chicago to do a panel on women's sexuality. And there's only one male she would want on that panel, which was me. Of course, my ego was like, oh, yeah, who else but me, man? And then we got there and I was terrified. I was just like, what am I doing at this table? But it's this panel of women and they were talking quite frankly. And I was just sitting there. And then Anna would say teasingly, well, what about you, Luis? You must have an opinion about blah, blah, blah. So she forced me out of my shell and it was really fun. So I thought this woman's badass, like everybody did. And we stayed in touch and she had all these plans for me. And
for writers and creative types like me and Luis, it's easy to descend into our caves of solitude and often more difficult to find the right opportunities and communities to pull us out of our shells. The events and connections Anna always seemed to be building with big literary names attached, like Cheryl Strayed of the best-selling memoir Wild, or Ashley C. Ford, or Saeed Jones, or the list goes on, held a certain appeal to the aspiring or emerging writer class. It's normal, even encouraged, for writers to visit residencies, retreats, conferences, and workshops to develop their craft with their contemporaries. All of these elements, writing, meeting, drinking, eating, circling the competition, screwing the competition, well, they've been happening for centuries, maybe millennia, and they'll never get old. It's part of the writerly temperament to scurry forth a few times a year and socialize, after which we all head back to our lairs to do the work. Creatives also have to be really careful about energy drain. And one thing I remember about Anna March is she knew this. She knew that you ask someone to a one-on-one lunch and then ask them to a party, and then, have something small again, and then have them come to something big. She was very intentional and strategic about bringing people into her fold. Like Melissa and Luis, my professional relationship with Anna March was a slow build before it imploded. After our lunch date, we were touch and go via email or text. Anna seemed to be busy. Whether it was a new project in the literary community or a personal health or family crisis, her emails or texts were always prefaced with "can't talk" or "on the go," then followed by a longer explanatory paragraph about why, which must have taken time to craft. Here's Luis talking about what all of this seemed to imply.
She had the con artist's genius, I think, of giving you a taste of what you most needed. And I think all of us writers need connection, guidance, success, voice, publication. Why are we doing this? And she also was a hell of a good actor. She she played this role of this together, slightly overwhelmed by success woman, a little impatient with it all, but I'm getting it. But I think that was the key to the scam. I am so fucking important. It's hard for me to compartmentalize it, but I'm doing it. I'm getting it all together. And that was always the thing that moved the little cup with the pee around on the table, Yes, I'm just putting this aside right now. I'm tending to this. And whatever, I don't remember details anymore, but whatever things we were talking about, as pertaining to what I was doing or she wanted me to do, she was always having to move it aside just for a moment. And, and it threw me. And I remember thinking she presented herself like some Hollywood figure almost, very busy, ready to go, very charming, very funny. And she claimed, which I thought was kind of brilliant. It had chutzpah, but she claimed familiarity with every author and every topic. So you thought, shit, she knows everything. You wanted to be her for a minute.
About a year after our initial lunch meeting, Anna did end up recruiting me for a project. The 2016 election was over.
I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
Doing mission-driven work that elevated women and underrepresented voices, well, for me and a lot of people, it felt more urgent than ever.
We're wearing the Pence pussy hats now. I never thought I'd be saying that, but we're wearing it because he has no right to be grabbing women's pussies.
And Anna, who had historically aligned herself with feminist initiatives, capitalized on the political uncertainty. Here I am talking to my producer about how I wound up being the books editor for Anna's new online digital magazine, Roar, in 2017. Anna decided she was going to start a new online magazine called Roar, or Roar Feminist. And she came to me and offered me all sorts of different positions, executive editor, managing editor, this and that. And I said, you know what? Let me try books editor out, because it was right in my wheelhouse. And I thought, okay, I'll see how this goes. And it was a great opportunity. There were some amazing people that she'd gathered, essayists and critics and artists, people who were doing fascinating things, everything from, combining genres to someone who was doing a column about abortion stories, to a woman who was putting together these fascinating dioramas that were really politically charged. So I thought this is a great opportunity to work with all of these different people. We were male and female and non-binary, mostly femmes, but a lot of people from underrepresented groups, and so different kinds of voices. And I thought for me to take, sort of a back seat instead of, saying, oh, sure, I'll be the big, kahuna managing editor, felt like the right choice at that time as well. So Anna told me she'd pay me $1,000 a month. That's a nice chunk of change. That made sense for me. I didn't think I needed a lot more. I was just doing the books column. And I thought she had money. And, the first couple of months when I sent in invoices and got no pay, I thought, all right, I do this. I batch invoices. This is a new venture. It'll be okay. In a few months, she'll pay. And I think she probably paid once in the first, it's hard to remember, let's say 5 or 6 months. And then there were no other payments. And I wound up, having to be really tough in order to get more of the money she owed me. And later in the episode, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it was pretty difficult. And the other thing that really disturbed me is that although she had, even if she wasn't paying me all the time, she had at least promised to pay me. But a lot of the contributors, especially people who were contributing some of the content I thought was most exciting and most well put together, were getting very, very little.
And again, like her whole thing was that she was trying to elevate underrepresented groups, underrepresented voices, but then not paying them appropriately.
Exactly. To fill in a few blanks here, I also saw Anna in person at a big writers' conference in March of 2017. This was at the first, and what I didn't realize at the time, the last, in-person meeting of the Roar team. Anna looked healthy. She hosted an event attended by all sorts of big names like Roxane Gay. At that time, everything was looking good for our writing retreat in Positano. I had no reason to believe otherwise. Plus, I was excited to go to Italy.
Specializing in scenery, shopping, and sand, the resort town of Positano hangs on the most spectacular stretch of the coast.
After all, my friends and other legitimate writers would be there. Here I am talking to my friend Luis again about how this whole trip to Italy eventually got derailed. My bullshit meter finally went off in 2017, just before this retreat was supposed to happen. And Anna called one day and I said, "Where is this villa?" Because I'd been to Positano, I'd been to Siren Land. And so I knew it very well. And I said, "Where are we staying?" And she sent me this link to a house that doesn't actually exist. Come on, there's Google Earth now. You can see where the villas are, right? I'm like, Anna. And she says, she says, "Well, I'm going to send you another link, but I have to let you know I have ankle cancer." And I was like, what? Now, you might remember, I've broken my ankle badly several years back, the Franken ankle. And so I'm like, there is no such thing as ankle cancer. Do you have bone cancer? I was very concerned, but here was the thing that tipped me off. She said this to me right after she'd sent me the link to the non-existent villa. And I said, "Anna, you realize Positano was all stairs."
The village is squished into a ravine with narrow pedestrian-only alleys that cascade down to the harbor.
You're probably thinking, "Bethahan, how could you be so dumb to fall for this person?" And for years. Trust me, I've thought the same thing. First things first, I thought Anna March was capable of hosting a writing retreat abroad because I had already seen her do it. In the summer of 2016, Anna held a writing workshop in Provence, France, at La Pichoune, the former estate of the legendary Julia Child. La Peach, as child aficionados called it, had recently been purchased by a Smith College alum, McKenna Held, and was open to outside workshops for the first time in over a decade. Anna had booked her own writer's retreat at La Peach the day after the one I was attending there ended. So she asked me to come to lunch that Monday and talk to her group about what it was like to live as a freelance writer. I didn't even see the ridiculousness of this or ask or know anything about who the writers attending would be. I just thought it would be fun, and after all, I was already there. And the other main reason that I kept buying into Anna's stunts, well, it's something that Melissa and Luis and many in Anna's orbit have said again and again. The literary world still runs on trust. When somebody declaims something, a fellowship, a book deal, a promotion, people take them at their word. And as Melissa identified when talking about that swinging rooftop party, people in this biz will size up your credibility based on who you know. Anna March always seemed to be associating with very big deal writers. So who was I to question their judgment? These people were very successful. But this undercurrent of trust also derives, of course, from the nature of the writing beast. Writers are solitary. We pour our individual consciousnesses into novels, short stories, poetry, memoir, and plays. It takes a monumental amount of trust to turn that work over to another reader, to believe that that reader will not casually mock or unkindly correct the words you've worked so hard to set down on a page. Anna was effusive about other people's work. She was accepting. She was kind. But to what end?
And I should have known that it was, it was kind of ridiculous. It was too good to be true. And why me?
That's award-winning author and my friend Karen Palmer talking about her experience with Anna March and her trip to Italy in summer 2017.
She said she wanted to hire me as an instructor at this one that she was going to do in Positano in Italy. And I thought, oh, that's great. And she said, I can't pay you, but you will have free room and board. If you can get yourself to Italy, there's free room and board for a week on the Amalfi Coast. And I'm going to have a chef and all this kind of stuff.
Karen Palmer met Anna March in Los Angeles in 2016 in much the same way we all did, over a long, decadent meal.
I knew of her for about a year before I ever actually met her in person. She came out to visit some friends or something.
She was complimenting your work. Absolutely, correct?
Yes. And of course, it's like the praise is so few and far between. It was like, it was this balm to have someone. And not only did she praise it, she got it, which is a very seductive thing. And then she was also very confessional. She did this thing that I think women do when there's a spark between them and they are maybe destined to be friends, where you give up a little bit of yourself and then the other person gives up a little bit of themselves. And it goes back and forth. I mean, it was a long lunch. It was, 2.5 hours. And it felt very intimate. I have no idea whether this is even true, but we talked about going to Catholic girl high school, all these kinds of things that it's not that we had them in common, but it felt like we understood each other.
Another thing Karen and Anna bonded over at this lunch date, which I had to ask her about when we chatted, was their shared experience embracing new names and writing about the traumatic events that led to this major decision to overhaul their identity. You can read Karen's gripping account of how she disappeared under a false alias to protect her family in a 2016 essay, The Reader is the Protagonist, published in the Virginia Quarterly Review. You can read a much gauzier tale of necessary name changes in the online magazine Literary Orphans by Anna March. Her edgy yet prosy essay entitled What's in a Name? A Biography of Sorts details a long history reclaiming her identity and healing from familial abuse by taking on a slew of new names over the years. Reading this particular piece back, it seems a lot of the secrets about the woman we all knew as Anna March were right there, hiding in plain sight.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because that was another thing we bonded during this lunch, was I had read this essay of hers. And, I've read other of her writing, and that essay is the only thing that I ever liked, was that one essay. And it was because it spoke to my situation about having changed your name and having done this thing that even if you feel like you have a good reason, you're kind of ashamed of having done. And I thought it was honest, and that appealed to me.
So it was through these deeply personal and generously vulnerable conversations that Anna built trust with Karen during this fateful lunch date.
I thought we were going to have a quick lunch, and we wound up talking a very long time. And, we had sandwiches and we had milkshakes, and she was very complimentary about the essay. And in the course of the lunch, she started talking to me about these workshops that she was doing. She was putting on these sort of, 1 week, or I think they were 1 week. I don't think they were longer than that. Like groups of maybe 5, 6, 7 people, mostly women, but not exclusively, would go someplace, kind of exotic or different, as a way to have like a little mini residency. And we would all write. And there would be, communal meals and that sort of thing. She said she wanted to hire me as an instructor at this one that she was going to do in Positano in Italy. And I thought, oh, that's great. And she said, I can't pay you, but you will have free room and board. If you can get yourself to Italy, there's free room and board for a week on the Amalfi Coast.
When did alarm bells start ringing for you about Anna?
Well, just to go back, there was one last part of this first lunch. Okay, so she invited me to lunch. She wanted to take me to lunch. When we first sat down, she was like, this is on me. So 2.5 hours later, we go to pay, and she doesn't have any money. She's forgotten her credit card. So, it was fine. So I paid, it was an expensive afternoon. And then I had paid, the penalty in the parking garage. It was like $100 afternoon with this person who supposedly was inviting me to lunch to offer me a job. So when I say it was a precursor, that's also a part of what was a precursor, is that it, looking back on it, it's like, well, she never had any intention of paying.
Let's talk about what led up to Positano. What were you thinking about the retreat?
Well, I think, again, Anna was having sort of this reputation at the time as kind of a guru, a writing guru, and particularly with women, and particularly middle-aged women. So I didn't really know what was expected of me. And I kept writing Anna saying, okay, I'm trying to prepare what I'm going to teach. Can you give me some idea of, of what you're looking for, of what the format is? Is it a 2-hour workshop in the morning? Just some kind of heads up about what the structure was going to be, because I hadn't heard anything. We were getting closer and closer to the time that we were going. I had bought my plane ticket, all this stuff. And she just wouldn't write back. I wouldn't hear from her. And I remember you and I had these exchanges going, what's going on with Anna?
From what I know of you as a friend, but also as a writer, you're a pretty careful planner.
Yes.
Would you ever have operated like this in another circumstance?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, I am too much of a control freak.
Why did we abandon our senses?
We wanted to go. We wanted to go. I really wanted to go. I, at a ripe old age, had never been to Europe. This was my first opportunity to go. And I was thrilled. And as a matter of fact, I arranged to go 3 days early so I could spend some time in Rome before going to Positano and meeting, everyone else who was attending. So, I was just thrilled.
So you get on this flight, you're very excited. When did you find out that the whole thing had been canceled?
So I'm standing at this, in this little cobblestone street outside this place where I'm supposed to stay. I take out my phone and I look at my phone, and there's a message from Anna to the group in which she has canceled the workshop. Because I went early, I think I was the only person out of that group that was actually in Europe at the time she canceled. But she canceled a day or two before other people were flying. So, and I'm sure people had non-refundable tickets and all kinds of mess. But I was the only one that was actually stranded. And I was frantically writing her nothing.
How did you finally get home?
I wound up staying the entire time of my ticket because I had a non-refundable ticket and I couldn't change it. So I thought, well, I'll try to make the best of it. And, it's Rome. How bad can it be? Even though I was scared out of my wits because, again, I didn't speak the language and I didn't know what I was doing and I was just lost. I made it through the 10 days and I flew home. And then tried to get my money from Anna.
Did you ever get reimbursed?
She did. She partially reimbursed me. And I think, it seemed to me that the way it went was she kind of paid people back based on who could cause the most trouble for her.
She should have paid for your therapy.
Yeah, no kidding. We were also traumatized. It was like telling the story. It's hard to convey how traumatizing the whole thing was. When I got back to Los Angeles and you and I talked, and it just seemed like it was a total grift.
Upon returning to LA, Karen started talking to other people who had been deceived by Anna March. It began as an email exchange between a few people But every day, it seemed, a new victim joined the thread, bringing along with them their own story of how Anna had misled them into a money-losing venture.
I was really scared of her. And I'm not I guess I thought that she would do something to my reputation, or she would badmouth me to people that I thought were friends. I felt very vulnerable, as I know everybody in that group did. You know, we all just kind of bitched for a while, and it took Melissa Chadbourne to finally say, I'm going to write about this.
For me, and a lot of people connected with Anna March's circus, the failed Positano trip was a nail in the coffin to her credibility. Then, the following year, in summer 2018, Melissa Chadbourne and Carolyn Kellogg published a broad, sweeping investigative piece for the LA Times that revealed that Anna March was merely an alias. The woman we had all thought we knew had a checkered past in the nonprofit sphere, preying on the pocketbooks of vulnerable communities, and with a history of subtle name changes, she had disappeared into thin air. Who was this person? And what was she after?
She was born Nancy Delaney Anderson. Was it Nancy Cruz? There's been so many names.
Let's find out after the break. Chapter 3, The Consequences. Who was Anna March? Where did she come from? And was this her first time whisking into a community, building relationships and abruptly disappearing with a stack of unpaid invoices in her wake? Let's circle back with one of our story's heroes, Melissa Chadbourne, who, like Karen, had been out of money from one of her few dealings with Anna and wound up on this post-Positano email chain in 2017.
So somebody on the email chain was able to do background checks and discovered her aliases. She was born Nancy, was it Nancy Cruz? There's been so many names, but
there's been so many names.
Delaney Anderson is a completely fabricated name. So Nancy, I think, is her, Nancy Lott is her birth name.
Okay.
And then Nancy Cruz is her married name. Now she's using Anna March Cruz.
It was time to permanently document what kind of person Anna March really was, and online for everyone to see and read. So the gist of the LA Times piece that Melissa reported was that Anna March, before she went by that name, had aligned herself with various political campaigns and nonprofit orgs and founded consultancies and charitable funds over the years, only to defraud them of money and then disappear into the ether. A write-up in the public broadcasting newsletter The Current reported on how, in 2005, her fundraising consultancy, Cruz and Partners, failed to live up to its end of a partnership with NPR and its affiliate stations, leading to a judgment against her that totaled more than $380,000. She would sweep in, host incredible events, and charm good people, many of whom stood for progressive causes, and then, just as folks took notice of financial loose ends, she would vanish and adopt a new name, then seemingly reskin this grift with a new community under a different alias. But how did she get away with this time and time again? It was a combination of tactics. Anna or Nancy or Delaney or whomever seemed to seek out vulnerable groups, communities that run on trust and word-of-mouth referrals. Here's Karen talking about the why and how of it all.
You know, everything is a power dynamic, even in writing. I thought of her as someone who had more power than me because she was apparently friendly with all these famous writers. And, you know, I was just a little midless person, you know, toiling away in obscurity. And I felt like she's going to crush me like a bug. And of course, it doesn't make any sense now. It seems ridiculous. But again, her nose for people that were vulnerable. And I know we talked about this at the time. She reminded me a lot of my ex-husband. My crazy ex-husband, who was a gaslighter and, you know, somewhat of a sociopath. It's like there were parallels there. And I think that maybe contributed to my fear also, is I felt like, after the experience with my husband, I thought I had a good nose for people that were a problem. And apparently not,
But writing is a healing practice, and by putting pen to paper, did offer a kind of catharsis for the wronged. Here's Melissa again.
And I'm also grateful that, like, this is sort of a healing experience to report on it, in that, like, how often are you gaslit and then you call it out and you're right and it's published, I mean, in that sense, it is great. It's like, how often do we get to do that? I mean, everyone loves a grifter story, I think, for that reason. It's because it's like, it's got that arc. A lot of people have painted her as like a woman who preys upon other women, and particularly women of color. And I'll just say that the biggest survivor victims in her wake were actually men, and men she dated. They were kind of taken for everything. And she's more akin to like a Dirty John than like, I mean, that's really where her real grift happens, is like she finds men and presents herself a certain way and always has some windfall that is coming later. Like the way she when she met Adam's family, she had mentioned that she's, stands to inherit a great deal of money. And so sort of legitimized him fronting her lifestyle.
I'm sorry. This just makes me actively cry. I'm really sorry. At this point during my interview with Melissa, I started to tear up. You see, when I crossed paths with Anna March, I met a lot of the people Melissa was talking about. I met at least one of the men who, in the end, had been caught up in a relationship that left him hurt and out thousands of dollars. I met the women whose vulnerability Anna preyed on. Hell, I was one of those women. All season, we've talked about people caught in the crosshairs of literary grifters. But when you can put faces, names, and memories to the wronged, when you're one of the people who fell under their spell, well, the story feels a little different. Looking back, in the great scheme of things, the money that Anna ran off with didn't necessarily amount to much. But for the vulnerable communities she got into business with, in some cases, the checks she skipped out on sending were the difference between people paying rent or eating dinner. For me, Luis, Karen, and Melissa, we were left wondering, what was Anna really after? And was she still out there somewhere?
I probably will Google her until I die, every 6 months or so, just to see.
My confession is I still miss her. I look up Anna March still to see if that creature has surfaced. But whoever Anna March, the construction is now gone. But I can't imagine this avaricious machine, this Terminator, has stopped. She must be somewhere else. Perhaps she's, she's organizing farmers for Farm Aid. Who knows what she's doing? But, when you run a scam, sooner or later, the scam rusts and breaks. And, and it's all these terms, her need, whatever that thing inside her brought her down.
It's complicated, and then it's not complicated in the sense that really it's sad. Because what she was getting, or what she was after, was some type of love and recognition. And, she burned people along the way, and she went about it the wrong way. But I think that it was just like a really, her complicated grift was about love and recognition. It wasn't like she was hoping to get rich one day.
And maybe to gain some kind of collective closure, Melissa told me about what happened when she recently did Google Anna March.
Here she is. Anna March Cruz is a junior at SCS, majoring in liberal studies and formally following the theology major, religion, politics, and the common good, and philosophy minor at the college. Like St. Ignatius, she's an adult learner with a complicated justice-involved past. After a crucible event in 2018, Anna returned to college in the fall of 2020 after a 32-year hiatus. She is the proud recipient of a Father Lafarge scholarship at Georgetown. She loves living on the Hilltop campus and is happy to be back in D.C., her hometown, after a dozen years living away in Rehoboth Beach. She is thrilled to be at Georgetown and grateful for the opportunity to learn, to repair, and to get ready to go forth and be of good service. A lifelong activist and writer, she loves kayaking, the arts, contemplation, the practice of making amends, and traditional mahjong. She's a member of the Anthem, Georgetown's literary magazine, and a supporter of Georgetown's mutual aid fund. She adores the Pivot program, feels a real kinship with the fellows, and is grateful for the grace they offer her and all they are teaching her about how to live with dignity.
Pardon me while I die on tape. While I just I was trying so hard to just shut myself up while you were reading so we could get a clean tape.
Yes, we all do enjoy contemplation. I mean, so that was taken down. I think the person who shared it with me contacted the school. They contacted the school to say this person is a bullshit person.
In the end, my little corner of the literary world did get some kind of redemption, thanks to people like Melissa and Karen and Luis, people who chose to speak up. But if you find yourself being invited to an all-expenses-paid Italian villa by a pink-haired feminist who wants to wine and dine their way to taking down the patriarchy, maybe try a background check first. Did you like learning about Anna March? Are you interested in learning about other literary grafters and grifters throughout history? Then I'd recommend checking out these titles. Given Anna March's Julia Child house business, perhaps you'd enjoy Julie and Julia by Julie Powell. We've been recommending lots of newish books, so let's make an exception to the rule. The great American con artist novel, The Confidence Man, His Masquerade by Herman Melville. Can You Ever Forgive Me by Lee Israel. Such a great book and movie starring Melissa McCarthy. Missing Pages is a Podglomerate original and is written and produced by a small army. Showrunner, Kayla Littman. Producer, researcher, and writer, Jordan Aaron. Producer, Matt Keeley. Production, mixing, and mastering by Chris Boniello. Fact-checking by Kathleen Henriquez. Marketing by Joni Deutsch, Morgan Swift, and Madison Richards. Social media by Sylvia Butel. Art by Tom Grillo. Production and hosting by me, Beth Ann Patrick. Executive produced by Jeff Umbro and the Podglomerate. Special thanks to Dan Christo, The Modern Love Podcast, Nina Simone, Luis Urrea, Positano Italy, Karen Palmer, Melissa Chadburn, Melissa Chadburn's entourage of puppies, and I guess to Anna March, wherever she may be. You can learn more about Missing Pages at thepodglomerate.com, on Twitter at MissPagesPod, and on Instagram at MissingPagesPod, or you can email us at missingpages@thepodglomerate.com. Listen to Missing Pages on Amazon Music or wherever you find podcasts. If you liked what you heard today, please let your friends and family know and suggest an episode for them to listen to. I'm Beth Ann Patrick, and we'll be back next week with another episode.